All right, so in this video presentation, I'm going to go over um, just kind of some random pieces of information that help you prepare for understanding what the laws and regulations are for flying your drone. And we're just going to jump right into it and see how much we can cover in a period of time. So let's talk about, first of all, the maximum weight in pounds that a drone can be for you to legally fly with Part 107. And so this is referring to drones that are less than 55 pounds. And there's two facts that will always be on the examination, and they're easy to get confused. That's the maximum weight in pounds of a drone. So anything that's larger or greater than 55 pounds is not Part 107 license. It's a different license, not for what we're going to talk about. So less than 55 pounds, so that's 54.99. If it's 55 pounds, then you can't fly it with Part 107. The other one is 0.55 pounds. And this is asking you, at what point does a drone need to have a registration? That's any drone that's larger or weighs more than 0.55 pounds. Okay, so just kind of try to do your best to remember those. They're two 55s. One being, again, less than 55 pounds is what you can fly with the Part 107, and greater than 0.55 is the minimum weight that you have to register a drone. So that goes to say that anything that is over 0.55 pounds has to be registered. Now, just kind of think and remember that if you get a really small drone that you're just going to fly indoors, one of the ones that if you took outside, just a little nano drone, if you took it outside, it would be blown away in the wind. It doesn't really matter inside the building because all of these policies refer to airspace. So if you're inside a gymnasium or inside your house, these rules don't apply. This is for outside. So once they get to be over 0.55, you have to go to FAA Drone Zone and register your drone, regardless of whether you are a recreational flyer or a Part 107 commercial pilot. Okay. Now, the minimum age for a person to register a drone is 13. So when you go to FAA Drone Zone, you can take your drone there and you can create an account. And within that account, you can pay the $5 to register a drone. Say you're 13 years old and you got one for Christmas, then you'd want to go to FAA Drone Zone and register the drone. For the drone to fly outdoors, it needs to be registered. So that just means if you're under the age of 13, doesn't mean your drone doesn't need to be registered, but an adult should register that for you. Now, the minimum age for an application for Part 107 drone license, this should be a pretty easy one to remember. It's the age 16, which is pretty common throughout most of the states, is when you get your driver's license to drive a car. So think about that. Those two is the same thing. All right, let's talk about the maximum ground speed. The maximum ground speed for your drone, believe it or not, is 100 miles. That's pretty darn fast. So let's see, 87 knots or 100 miles per hour. That's as fast as you can legally fly your drone. Now, I promise you, if you're going 100 miles per hour, it's going to be out of your line of sight pretty darn quick. And there you go. So, but if you're doing FPV drone competitions, and for some reason, I don't know, you want to go 100 miles an hour, and you're making loops or movements around a course that you can still have visual line of sight, then I guess you can fly at 100 miles an hour. All right. Next is the maximum number of drones that any remote PIC can fly simultaneously. So you heard me say remote PIC. It's going to be listed in a bunch of different documents, different depending upon when it was produced. PIC just refers to pilot in command. That is you with the Part 107, so pilot in command, pilot in control, pilot in charge. You're going to hear it referred to different ways, or you may say RPIC. It's all the same thing. It's the Part 107 pilot who's flying the drone. So you should only fly one drone at a time. And this kind of opens up the question. Let's say you go, well, hey, what about drone swarms? Whole different ball game. When you do something that's outside of the standard process, in this case, the maximum number of drones that a single RPIC can fly simultaneously is 1. If you want to fly 2 of them, then that's a communication that you can have with the FAA. So a lot of times, some of these things can be waived. Not likely that they will be waived, but sometimes they can. And so the folks that are doing the drone shows, they have a lot of different waivers in place because they're able to demonstrate or articulate how they can do something that's not within process, which is fly more than one drone, and how they're going to do it safely. So if you can demonstrate to the FAA and you have a legitimate purpose to be doing that, like doing a drone show, then you may or may not get the waiver, but that's kind of where you start with that. All right, so now let's talk about the maximum altitude, AGL, or above ground level, that you can fly your drone if there's no taller structures around. Okay, so let's talk about that. There's a couple of things to unpack. Let's unpack this 400-foot rule. That's pretty standard, that pretty much everywhere you go that's not right next to an airport is going to be 400 feet. So if you're out at Claremore and you're on campus at RSU, there's no controlled airspace there, so 400 feet is your maximum. There's not a whole lot that's going to cause you problems with that. Now, you can have a 400-foot radius around an object that is higher than 400 feet. You have a big skyscraper hotel. You have a transmission power line. You have TV, radio antennas, whatever it is, whatever structure, a mountain, whatever structure is there, you have this 400-foot radius that you can maneuver around. You can go above the top of that surface 400 feet. So let's talk about that, because I've kind of said a lot of things. Let's first go back and talk about above ground level. There are 2 terms that you're going to hear when we talk about altitude: above ground level and above sea level. So let's just say, for example, we're at the beach. Okay, we go to the ocean and our toes are in the water. Rough and about, we're going to be at 0 AGL. So we're 0 feet above ground level. We also happen to be 0 feet above sea level, because we're not above sea level. We're at sea level. Our toes are in the water. Okay. Now, if you imagine moving inland from the shore, as the terrain of the country increases. So, for example, if you walk all the way to the Mile High Stadium in Colorado, you're, let's say, a mile above sea level. That's how high you are. That's the difference between the sea level and the street or the entrance to the stadium. Okay, just rough numbers. I don't know if it's actually a mile high, but anyways, you go to Denver, you know you're going to be a lot higher above sea level than if your toes are in the water. So ground level really refers to only the distance above the ground from where you take off. So once you take off from the ground, then you are allowed to fly 400 feet above ground level. Now, the number that you're flying above sea level may, in a lot of cases, if you're not in Florida or San Diego, you will be higher than 400 foot above sea level. Hope that makes sense. There is that exception to the rule that when you are, let's say you're inspecting a skyscraper and you're going to want to view the air conditioning units on the top of that building that's higher than 400 feet, you are allowed 400 feet from the top of that surface. Okay? So kind of think of the top of the building as the ground level. Obviously, a plane is not going to fly at 350 feet above ground level when there's a large object or obstruction like a tower or a building. So they're also going to take that 400 feet. They're going to fly above 400 feet above the top of the building. All right, now I want to talk about the number of minutes before sunrise and sunset that is considered civil twilight. You can fly your drone during twilight if you have the appropriate anti-collision lighting. Whew! Okay, so there's a lot of stuff there. Let's talk about sunrise and sunset. They change with the moon cycle. I'm not going to get into that. If you jump on your iPhone or any weather app, each day it will tell you what that sunrise and sunset is. So saying that sunrise is at 6 a.m. one day, then you can fly during the civil twilight, which is at 30 minutes before. So from 5:30 a.m. to 6 a.m., that's your civil twilight. You can fly. Now those additional and appropriate anti-collision lights, these are the strobes that can be seen by 3 statute miles. That's going to authorize you to fly during that 30 minutes before sunrise, and the same thing at sunset. So the sun sets at 7 p.m. You have additional 30 minutes before you cannot fly under the civil twilight. But again, you got to have the anti-collision lighting, and night flying is a whole different ballgame. We'll talk about another point, but we're just talking about flying 30 minutes before and after sunset. All right, now the critical bank in degrees where the drone experiences a dramatic increase in loading. So this has a lot to do with center of gravity, kind of talked about in earlier chapters, load and weight, and it's 45 to 50 degrees. That's the angle that the drone can bank before we're going to experience quite a bit of change in the loading factors. So if you took your drone and you tried to fly your drone 90 degrees barrel roll, it's not going to work out for you. Okay. So 45 to 50 degrees, we're going to have dramatic increase. And I know a lot of this is extremely dry and it's just not, just super, super interesting. But these are some of the facts that we just have to go through, understand what they mean, and be prepared for us to recall them when we go to take a test. The next one is the number of statute miles needed for minimum visibility to fly a drone. Okay, that number is 3. So just as before I talked about there being proper lighting so that you can fly during civil twilight, that anti-collision lighting needs to be seen by 3 statute miles. And I'm kind of repeating this so that starts to sink in. The number 3 repeating itself, which is the number of statute miles needed for minimum visibility to fly a drone. What does that mean? That means that when we talk about the distance and how far that we can see something, we need to see it for 3 statute miles. So if I was to send a friend from where I'm standing now, heading straight forward for 3 miles, and they, stick a light up in the air and start flashing a light, can I see that light? If I can't see that light for 3 statute miles, then I don't have minimum visibility to fly. And so that typically is going to be, it's going to be fog and low cloud levels. Hey, if it's a wildfire and there's a lot of smoke in the area and you don't have 3 feet of statute miles, then you shouldn't be flying your drone. We're not just trying to say, well, I can't fly my drone 3 miles away from me. No, you can, but you have to be able to visually see manned aircraft that may be approaching. If they're flying at 500 miles an hour and you can only see 3 statute miles, that distance between you and the manned aircraft will still close relatively quick. So you still got to have quite a bit of visibility. All right, so we have a minimum distance in feet that you're supposed to fly below a cloud. Okay, so here we go. We talked about going to Denver, and we talked about being higher above sea level than 400 feet, but we're only 400 feet above ground level. Now we're talking about the distance that you need to fly below a cloud. All right, so now you get to this mountain, and you're at the base of the mountain. You want to take your drone up and get some shots. At the base of the mountain, you can't see the tip of the mountain because there is clouds covering over the tip of the mountain. As long as you have 500 feet between where you are and where your drone is, then you can fly your 400 maximum above ground level. As you go up to the top of the mountain, you then enter into the clouds, and there's a turnoff there where you can, again, get out and take some images. But because the cloud level is so low, and maybe there's only 100 feet between you and the bottom of the clouds, although you have authorization to fly 400 feet, you don't have the visibility to fly because you don't have 500 feet minimum distance between you and the clouds. All right, now the minimal horizontal distance in feet that you must fly from a cloud is 2,000 feet. That's kind of difficult to measure. Just know that it's 2,000 feet, and obviously if you have a cloud front that's coming extremely close to you, and again, that's going to be messing with your 3 statute miles needed for your minimum visibility, then of course those two things are going to work together as that 2,000 miles begins to closer to you if you had a storm front coming to you. So keep 2,000 feet horizontally, right? That's left and right of you, and keep 500 feet above you between clouds. All right, just a few more here on this video, then we're going to stop this video. Now, the number of hours that must have passed after consuming alcohol before you can fly a drone. All right, you have to be physically and mentally fit to fly a drone, and even after the 8-hour window is passed. So let's start thinking about driving a car, driving a commercial vehicle. 8-hour rule. Okay, you need to have 8 hours to have passed after you consumed your last beverage, but you still need to be physically and mentally fit. So if you had a whole lot of alcohol and you were really hungover and you were not physically and mentally capable to fly, you still can't fly even though you haven't had a drink in 8 hours. So you have to take those two things into consideration. For the test, it's going to ask you at one point how many hours, which is 8, and then it's going to talk a little bit about being physically and mentally capable and prepared and ready to fly. All right, the maximum blood alcohol level that will allow you to fly a drone legally is 0.04. 0.04. Just got to memorize that. The number of days within which you are required to report to the FAA any drone-related accidents. And this is just a memorization game. It's 10. There are 10 days in which you are required to report to the FAA any drone-related accidents. You're going to want to keep your eyes out on an exam when we talk about the days. Some of it is just 10 days. Some of it, which is calendar days. If they just say 10 days, it's 10 calendar days. Some other questions may refer to business days, and so you'll just have to memorize those and know the difference between those. All right, the number of days within which you must notify the FAA if a change is made to your address. This is pretty similar to your driver's license. In most states, they require 30 days. So 30 days is the number of days in which you must notify FAA if a change is made. All right, the number of days of lead time that the FAA recommends for filing a Part 107 waiver. So remember a little bit earlier I talked about that you only could fly one drone, And maybe you ask the question, well, what about the drone swarms? And I told you those things can be presented to the FAA and ask for a waiver. So 90 days. They're asking you to give them 90 days to review the facts. So don't come up a week, say in a week, and say, hey, 1 week from today, I need to fly at a location that's restricted, and can you please give me a waiver? Well, that's probably not going to happen because they're asking you to give them 90 days, and it's so important that they made a test question that says 90 days. All right, now the number of calendar months when the results of the Part 107 knowledge test remain valid. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go take that Part 107, and you are going to get a grade, and you're going to go take that grade, and you're going to turn it into a license, and those calendar months is 24. Okay, 24, 2 years. The Part 107 knowledge test is good for 2 years. And just as a side note there, when it comes time for renewing that Part 107 license, it does not require a new test, but it does require a certain amount of continuing education hours. And that course is provided free by the FAA, and you can find that at FAA Drone Zone. All right, and the last one here for this video, this session will be the number of years before a UAS registration expires. So this is the registration for the drone, not the registration for you and for your license. This is the UAS registration. It is 3 years. So that's the number of years before that registration will expire. And then you have to go back on the FAA Drone Zone. And I think that last time I looked, it was still $5 for the registration. And you would have to do that again. So that allows them to decide whether or not the drone that you're registering is still authorized and legal to fly. And if they want to make a change to a particular drone and pull that, well, they've got that 3-year period to revoke a registration. All right, so